And hello again, dear ones. Rev BRZ over here.
Rev Z right here.
And this is New Thought Today on the New Thought Media Network. Happens every Tuesday, 2 p.m. on the Mountain Time Zone right here. Thank you for being with us. And if any of you are looping over and hanging in from the show that just concluded, we just had the world premiere of Wisdom of the Mystics. With our own practitioner, Laura Topper, and Reverend Kathy Mastriani from the Science of Mind Archives. They just wrapped up their premiere episode of Wisdom of the Mystics, and it was a great show, and they've got some great announcements. I'm going to encourage you to go check out what's happening on that show. I learned that the great Reverend Jesse Jennings is going to be on the network in a couple of weeks, so that's exciting news. I think that'll be fun.
Yes.
However, we are here today to talk about a new thought in how we can use this new thought in our lives. And the first thing I want to do is I want to check in with my dear brother, Elzia here. Rev Z, we had a great time without you last week. So I think you owe it to everybody to let us know where you were and how you were practicing new thought last week.
Yes. I was practicing new thought in Puerto Vallarta. Taking some downtime, got some fishing in, and got some travel up in the mountains, and spent the time with family and friends. And a great way to start the new year to set a perspective on life and activities and communication. I mean, just a whole plethora of things. And I think, in terms of a new thought, one of the greatest things I've found about traveling, and especially now traveling in these times, it just enhances it, is this ability to really look at your life. Because when you go somewhere, it's totally different, especially like a place like Mexico, and it's Puerto Vallarta, so it's the beach. But, to have that contrast of what your normal everyday is, and to see how people are and see what the resort look like, and then you go into the city and eat and hang out with some of the locals, if you will. It really gave me a good inspiration for communication, connection at a worldwide, perspective. So happy New Year to everybody. We 11 days into this thing, and this ship has taken off, and we are rocketing somewhere.
Yes, we are. And it's the 11th of January. I mean, it's like, how did that happen in a blink? Here we're at the 11th already, and that's, to me, that's like, okay, we're pretty much halfway through the week, or halfway through the month, because by the time I look up, it's going to be the 15th. With as much work as we get done around here. So, okay, folks, here's what we want to talk about today. This program, as we enter the new year and as we come into 2020, we want to look at how can this philosophy, how can the people that are a part of this philosophy serve and impact the future, the evolution of humanity, of what's happening on the planet, no matter what it is that's happening. Mm-hmm. And whether whether we're, sorry, got a little distracted by a comment there. We'll circle back around to that. Prayers up for our brother Diego. And we want to look at how we can utilize this to demonstrate, well, this vision of a world that works for all. And one of the things that we both feel is rather important here is removing the false appearances of separation between the organizations that comprise the New Thought movement, if you will, today. So, what do I mean by all that? It's just a nice, fun philosophy that we all get to live and believe? Well, yes. And over time, as is the nature of human, is we tend to organize. We tend to gather around similar ideas and beliefs. And throughout the history of this philosophy, there have been various organizations that came forward to help collaborate, let's say, the various teachers and all that. We want to take a look at that today. And what we recognize is, well, both Z and I have our biases because we both found this through one avenue. As far well, and I'm gonna invite you to share a little bit of your journey here in a minute, Z, because your avenue was much more diverse and broad than mine was getting to New Thought. You had many more spiritual influences than I did, but we came to this philosophy through the science of mind or religious science, which we're going to talk about, and the organizations that went along with that. There's many more, and we've got a whole list of them we want to share with you today. So, but before we do that, I do want to get to what I was just setting up and give my brother Z a chance to share with you just a little bit. Your religious background and your spiritual background is very deep. So, without giving away exactly how old you are, how about give us the synopsis?
Yeah, well, I'm from the South, as some of you may know. So I was born and raised Christian. A couple of variants, I guess you would say, Free Will Baptist and African Methodist, AME, and then very young I converted over to Islam, and practiced Islam for a very long time, and I still today call myself an Islamic religious scientist. I have never given up the principles of Islam and the truth that's held within that philosophy. But then I also had an opportunity to study with some very great historians and Egyptologists, Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Joseph Ben Yachaman, and then I found religious science. I had one point I used to go. This was in the early '90s. I used to go to Lincoln Center in New York and see Norman Vincent Peale live. I had no idea who he was. I used to go with a friend, and I found the conversations great and the people were nice. So I used to go quite frequently. But that was before I knew anything about religious science, and so came to Denver and stumbled into Mile High Church, kicking and screaming at that time because I was still 100% Islamic. And I got there and I said to myself, well, these teachings are no different than what I'm learning. I look at it more as a Sufi order of an Islamic teaching. And so I just kept going, and then it stuck. And so here I am today.
We've known each other quite a long time. I know this story. I don't know that I've ever actually heard or cognized your description there of New Thought, or Mile High's version of it, as a Sufi order, which is cool. Because if we give it a little bit of thought, folks, it's not that. I can agree with you on that. That's an interesting approach to it all. And to me, that's what a big part of what all of this has always been about, is how does all of it fit together? We live in this philosophy that teaches oneness, that teaches we're all one, that it's all part of one thing. And so there has to be value in the Islamic practice, and there has to be value in Sufi teachings, and there has to be value in all the various pieces of it. And that's been my fascination, is how does it all fit together to become New Thought?
And the show that just came on, Secrets of the Mystics, right? Oftentimes you hear people quoting, when they talk about mystics, they'll quote Hafiz, or they'll quote Rumi, or they'll quote Averroes or Avicenna. All these guys were Muslims. And I know in New Thought, Rumi is used a lot.
Yes.
Once you get to these, what I would call higher level of activity and understanding, but more so engagement into an understanding beyond the dogma and the religiosity of the teachings, no matter which ones they are, Christian, Jewish, Islamic, Buddhist, doesn't matter. All of those teachings have a mystical order, if you will, that goes by many different names. And so it's at that place, like Rumi said, there's a place out there in the field. I'll meet you there beyond all this other stuff, because these teachings that we have in these different organizations are great to teach discipline and study and understanding and methodology. But after a while, like anything else, you can watch a film on swimming and know the movements and the strokes and all of that. But until you jump in the water, swimming really has no meaning to you.
Right.
And that's what this mystical thing is about. It's like I take these teachings, no matter what they are, and I execute them. Now I have a different understanding.
Right. Yes, exactly. As I'm listening to you, what I'm being called to is this sense that at a certain point, I have to drive a different road to get to my destination.
Mm-hmm.
Now, anybody that's ever commuted knows. Even if you have, I've lived in New Jersey and commuted into New York. I've commuted from within New Jersey. It's beneficial to stay on the main route and just get to where you're going. But some days you have to drive a different route. You have to take a different path to come to your same destination. And I believe sometimes we get a little trapped. Some people, and I know I have in the past, get trapped into the thinking that, well, this is the way. This thing I'm doing right now, this is the one and only way. Oh yeah, no, those ways work too. Yeah, that's just the long road. That's just, that's the slow road. I'm gonna take the highway. I'm gonna go the direct path, and this is the way, man. And that can cause some confusion for many.
Well, and there's an Islamic saying, if you will, that says the vehicle or mode of transportation you take to get to the door is not necessarily the same one you take to go through the door. And that's very significant because I may drive the car to the building, but I'm not going to drive the car through the door. I got to take another mode of transportation. I have to get involved at another level to really get the inner sanctum, if you will, or really get the inner understandings of a thing than just being in the vicinity of it or being in the neighborhood or hanging out next to it. All that's good. You will get some osmosis, as they say, but to really get that understanding, we have to be involved. We have to be active and engaged in our lives. And then from that, we almost are able to write our own books, if you will, of liturgy and rituals and understandings, because it's very much personal. Like your upbringing and my upbringing, two totally different things. So we could read the same verse very literally and insightfully get something totally different from the one sentence.
Completely differently. Exactly. Sometimes even from one word.
From one word. So now when we look at what we're talking about today, when we talk about the different organizations in the New Thought movement, if you will, they are geared toward the leader or the founders or the board of directors or however they're organized on how a specific methodology can be used to attain this understanding and this activation in our lives based on some experiences, and they've codified it and they put it out, and there we go.
Yeah, exactly. So folks, let's talk about that a little bit. And that's what we do want to break down a little bit today as well, is all these various organizations that are now out there. When we look at the real philosophical and let's call it religious foundation of the New Thought philosophy, we're talking about three primary organizations: Unity, Divine Science, and Religious Science. Now, the Unity movement has remained fairly solid within one or two organizations. Mm-hmm. You can still go to unity.org, and I see here's the producer not doing his job properly. Let's share a picture of that so people can find it. This is, there it is, A Positive Path for Spiritual Living. And you could find this at unity.org. This is their modern day representation of who they are. And this organization has grown and expanded. And in many ways, Z, it feels to me that they have stayed, well, maybe not when you look at divine science, but Unity has stayed pretty solid on a Christian influenced New Thought experience.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I look at them as a, again, I would look at them as a Sufi metaphysical version or interpretation or actualization of the teachings of Jesus. Because their focus is still on Jesus as the example of how you put these principles into practice, but they differ in terms of traditional Christianity, in terms of Jesus being the Savior, died on the cross and all of that liturgy, in terms of how they look at, activate, and interpret the teachings of Jesus.
Right. Yes. The other primary, one of the other three founding, if we will, that we like to look at is the divine science movement. Mm-hmm. And now the divine science movement, probably more than anywhere, has apparently fallen off. I'm missing my tab here. Here we go. Here, we'll find this tab here eventually. The Divine Science Federation appears to, if anything, have fallen almost off the map. And I've looked at it a little bit. I have no real clue why this might be. They are scheduled to have one of their conferences coming up this year. We're going to see what happens there. And why do I keep losing this tab? There's their homepage. DivineScienceFederation.org is where you can find this. My apologies, folks. You weren't even seeing all that. And you'll see here, Divine Science, a Spiritual Revolution since 1888. First taught by Melinda Kramer. And interestingly enough, here the very first Divine Science Church was here in Denver, Colorado. Z and I both had a beautiful chance to visit that location. Mm-hmm. Any sense there, Z? What? Well,
I think, my humble opinion is, over the past few years, the term New Thought has taken a little bit of a side, if you will, because people interpreted it or made statements or used it for their own purposes. Mm-hmm. And so I think some people who were on the sideline, and maybe this is true for divine science, have been resurrected, if you will, and now see a need to come out and become active again, to rectify some of that, one. But I think, two, more important, is something you and I talk about, and a lot of our colleagues, this teaching is needed now, I think, more than ever, on a forefront, to allow people to really get beyond all of the political issues and social media bashing and all those things. Now, just to be clear, that doesn't mean that doesn't happen in other places or even in our own organization, because we know humans are humans. And I'd like to take a little pause here for a break, that I would encourage everyone who's a reader and they like history to pick up the book Sapien by Yuval Noah Harari. That's Harari. I'm just in the beginnings, but it's a very excellent book in terms of looking at the evolution of man, if you will, and how we got to be from all fronts, social, political, from hunter-gatherer to agricultural to industrial, and now into the a whole nother thing. But it gives a good insight in terms of how things develop from a very, for the most part, hands off, not trying to push anything except for the historical facts. The other thing in this regard is, if you haven't seen the movie, and I guess we're okay with doing this, on Netflix, called Don't Look Up, I would advise and encourage everyone to watch that, because it talks about this thing of people pushing ideas, religions included. And I think back to the original point is that I think organizations that are intended to give people an opportunity to have good information and make independent choices are now on the scene. So I would say Divine Science looks like they're trying to get back in the game in that regard.
There we go. All right.
You don't win the answers for a short question. I know.
But no, seriously, don't look up, dude.
No,
Don't look up.
that movie is great, man, because
don't watch it. No,
yeah, you got to
watch it.
It is just the highlighting of what is going on now about the banter and the political stuff and people not making their own decisions and being led by different organizations, thoughts, ideas, and philosophies is so highlighted there till it's funny, and it is a comic movie to a lot of degrees.
It's a scary comedy. But yeah, I watched it. I loved it. Don't look up, folks. Just don't look up. Anyway, we're going to get it back on topic here sooner or later. But that's part of what we're about here, right? Having a good time and looking at how, again, how can this philosophy be utilized? How do we promote these belief systems into the world? And actually, I think Don't Look Up did a great job of accurately portraying where the consciousness of at least American society would appear to be right now.
Yes. And that's exactly right. And the whole idea of New Thought is, or not the whole idea, but a large part of the idea is to be able to make thought choices or conscious choices about what you want to do, how you represent yourself in the world, and not be, as Ernest Holmes says, not be affected by race consciousness or collective consciousness, or many different terms for it, of the prevailing thought of today that is very flighty.
Exactly. But you got us back on track. You said the magic words, Ernest Holmes, which is, folks, that's the entry point for both Reverend LZ and I. At the time, Ernest's philosophy, if you will, Ernest's work was brought forth through the Institute for Religious Science, and I want to emphasize that for a moment. Institute, a place of higher education, of higher learning, a place you go once you've learned the basics. The Institute of Religion, of religious. So once you've learned the basics of religion or religions, come here and learn and explore it at a different pace, at a different level, in a different way, and do it in a scientific way. The Institute of Religious Science. Do it in a scientific way. Go out and prove your hypothesis in the world. Use the laboratory of your life to prove whether or not what you're talking about is real, and if whether or not you're just full of it. And in that, a lot of people, for surprise, came to realize this is real. This works. Yeah. It's not a bunch of hooey. It really works. And that became this major growth in outlets, in people, in leaders stepping forward and saying, I need to share this too. This has made a difference in my life. I want to share this with the world. And we see a proliferation of spiritual communities, whether they're tied to the unity movement, whether they're tied to the religious science movement, which incidentally goes through its own internal politics and splits into two organizations that run parallel for many, many years. And we still have the three primary philosophies: divine science, unity, religious science. Now, here's what I love again, Z, is it's kind of like you can't hold a good idea down.
Right.
Because for all the foibles and limitations of the human experience of bringing forth this philosophy, the truth wins out. So Yes. Are there stories of ministers that have done wrong? Yes. Are there stories of churches that have harmed people? Yes. Have people made human mistakes over the last 50, 60, 80, 100 years of bringing this philosophy into the form it is today? Yes. Does that equate to throwing away the philosophy? Well, not in our minds, right? We're still here talking about it. However, what we do see is, let's call it a cross-pollination, and people move. And as society starts to grow and we're a more mobile society, people pick up from one location, go to another, and the church they were brought up in isn't there. Oh, I know this from Unity. There's not a Unity around. I'm going to go to the religious science church. Oh, I started in religious science, but there's nobody around. I'm going to go to the Unity church. And that cross-pollination also leads to a very fertile ground. I don't know that I've ever really turned at this before, but it feels like it's a new age of mystic.
Mm-hmm.
And many of those new... Sorry, that's probably a really bad... That's like using global warming, right? It's a really bad term. A new age of mystic. Sorry, we're going to have to change that right now. And I don't want to call it a new thought of mystics either, because that's going to get even more confusing. But I'm talking about people like Michael Beckwith and Roger Teal in his own right, and Sharon Stroud and Deborah Johnson, and a lot of the people that started to evolve, if you will, the organizational structure or the organizational perspective of how we do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Z, where do you want to jump in?
Well, I the whole word mystic, the esoteric is sometimes used, is this whole idea about understanding, into the mysteries or the so-called secrets of life to better understand and get in tune with life. You may have heard me, the audience have heard me say this before. We are not from someplace else. We are of the earth. All of the elements and things that are in the earth are in us, and we need those things. Minerals, everything, right? And so there's a secret there. There's a mystery there, not a mystery that can't be solved or can't be understood. This is like Ernest made the statement where he said, I look forward to the day where religion and science walk hand in hand, because the two are one and the same, two sides of a coin that help articulate and help us peer into things that previously we were not that able to get involved in or see. And so when we step into this mystical world or to this esoteric world, we go beyond the surface and we use various tools to give us an insight into those things that are unseen but are very real and very true. Gravity is one. No one has ever seen gravity. We've only seen the effects of gravity. And so to get to that level, there was a mystery. There was a secret that had to be unveiled to make that happen. And so when we can use that same thing in the manner of how we live our lives and how we treat each other and how we create, as we always say, this world that works for everyone, the mysteries or the secrets are what we really want to get into. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be turmoil or any of that, because that's just part of life. The changing from one thing to another is not always smooth. It is not always a happy place, if you will, for everybody. But the outcome of that, the results of that is what we're looking for. This continual spiral of evolution, of consciousness, of humanity and well-being that helps the planet, the individuals here, and in fact, the whole universe. Volume.
Lost my mic. Thank you, Z. And that doesn't sound hard to me. Maybe I've been hanging out in this stuff too long. After 20 years, maybe I've been around too long. That doesn't sound actually all that difficult. to me because this philosophy has always represented what works, and it has continually proven itself over the last 20 years of my life to work, to bring forward the opportunities, the experiences, and the revelations that are necessary to reveal this perspective of a world that works for everyone.
And this teaching is just like any other teaching or program where pick one, and at the root of them, they all tell you this works if you work it. If you don't work it, it will not work. And that means getting involved with it and practicing and using the principles and following the guidelines and principles that are laid out, and it'll work.
Yeah, exactly. All right, folks, you're watching New Thought today on the New Thought Media Network. We're at the bottom of the hour. That means we're going to take a quick commercial break and let a couple people say hello. Let us say hello and thank you to a couple of people, and perhaps even introduce you to a couple of new shows. So please give us a minute of your time. We'll be back shortly with more here on New Thought Today.
One power invisible, and you see it everywhere and every day. One power in
And we're back on New Thought Media Network. This is New Thought Today. I'm Rev BRZ, joined by my co-host, Rev BRZ, and we're talking about the organizations that create New Thought, because truly, folks, it's the organizations that are going to support taking New Thought forward. Now, there's a lot of communities, there's a lot of special focus ministries, there's a lot of initiatives, there's a lot of different things out there that we want to just kind of highlight and focus on a few of the bigger ones right now, and the ones that we see as capable of doing some good work in the world. Top of the list, first and foremost, Centers for Spiritual Living, organization of which Reverend LZ and I are both ordained ministers of. New Thought Media Network is a focused ministry of. Z's current calling to the Center for Spiritual Living Denver is a part of Centers for Spiritual Living, and they do a lot of great work in the world. And they are probably, maybe Unity's bigger, I'm not sure. But one way or the other, csl.org, you can learn a whole lot more about them and what they're doing. Z, we're going to be in, we're going to do a little future forecasting here. So, folks, next week, Reverend Z and I will be, at this time, we will probably just about be getting you out of the airport. as we'll be attending CSL's annual conference and convention. And it's an opportunity where a whole bunch of people come together. New Thought Media Network's going to be there. We're going to have a whole bunch of interviews and all kinds of people. But I guess the question I have for you, Z, is as we go into this and knowing that you're involved in organizational efforts behind the scenes and such, what's your biggest wish for CSL as an organization as we move forward into the coming years and the coming decades?
Wow, that's a great question.
I should have given you some warning on that one, huh?
Yeah, but I think the number one thing would be that we have and I'm not going to quote it verse and chapter here, but we have a vision principle where we look to evolve and help people evolve to their highest and greatest spiritual selves. And so with that being said, I'm hoping the conference sets a benchmark for how we go about increasing that, to be more inclusive, to be more active, to be more present in the community, not just for those who follow the practice, but for those who need the help or those who need the information. And so for me, I think if we can continue to move around that and engage the ministers and the practitioners in how to cultivate that kind of environment, that would be my wish.
Right on. Yes. Good. Now, folks, one of the things that we do know is that Centers for Spiritual Living does have its roots all the way back to the original Institute of Religious Science. And therefore, there is an organizational memory there. There is an organizational bias there as well. And in some forms, there is an organizational ego at play within that community as well. And what I know is, I don't think I've ever met such a group of people that are passionate about sharing how these principles have worked in their lives and how they have countless people they've worked with, countless people they've supported, that they've known, that have those same demonstrations, that have the same proof.
And one thing about that passion, you just click some. No matter where you go in terms of sharing ideas and planning for the future, if you will, it has always been those passionate people, and most often the ideal of that is artists, right, who are passionate about something and are able to bring forth the idea or the concept or the poem or song or painting passionately and engaging in dialogue about it, so that the totality of its presentation or its essence are presented for people to try on, figure out, so that it comes out whole or more whole and more complete. And that's what we're looking for as we look at these ways of life and ways of living, so that everybody benefits, so that no one is intentionally left out. Now, we know those things happen, but we don't want it to be by intention. We want it to be the intention of, we're going to include everybody. And if for somehow the philosophy or idea we came up at the present time is amiss, then passionately let me know or let us know, and we'll try to rectify it.
We'll passionately let go of it and do something else. I've more than passionately let go of a few things in my time.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And that's a great, thank you for sharing that, Z, because that's a great setup for some of what else we want to share here, folks, is because there are a lot of passionate people that aren't necessarily part of the big name organizations, Unity and Religious Science or the Centers for Spiritual Living. One of the people that we love to focus on, that we love to feature, and is a supporter of the New Thought Media Network, is Reverend Dr. Sharon Stroud from the Interfaith Spiritual Center in Palm Springs, California. She is not only a stalwart, has been in this movement and this philosophy for quite a long time, as long as anybody else I know of. She's had her own independent organization, the Interfaith Spiritual Center, for all that time. And she brings her Wednesday evening programs here onto New Thought Media Network, 8:30 on the Mountain Time Zone, 7:30 Pacific Zone. They share their Wednesday night services with us. And she's not the only one. Many people here probably do know of the Right Reverend and Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith and the work that he's created, the Agape International Spiritual Center. Oh, there's a picture of him on the Ellen Show. Oh, no, I haven't shared it yet. There it is. It'll come back around. So Agape International, born from born of the New Thought movement. Agape was originally part of the Centers for Spiritual Living prior to the reunification of organizations. And if you're ever in LA, don't skip your Sundays at Agape. I've learned if I'm ever within like 100 miles, it's like, yeah, we'll hang out and go to Agape on Sunday. Mm-hmm. It's a dynamic time. So, Z, of all the people, because it has become the era of the people that are growing into for a while here. Now, I think this pendulum is going to swing in a different way. There's one more I'd like to focus on real quick, actually, and that's Reverend Dr. Deborah Johnson and her organization, the Inner Light Center, and what they do in California as well, a little more northern California. Reverend Deborah Johnson's been on the program, been on a number of our programs, is a supporter of the network. This whole era of the personality, how does that play into propelling New Thought forward, do you think? Or does it?
I don't think that will ever go away, in the sense of it takes, for those people who aren't involved in the movement or not aware of the teachings, it takes a dynamic, charismatic, articulate, energetic person to be able to create the persona, if you will, of being the mouthpiece for the teachings. But the challenge, as we learned in school, is if any organization is solely tied to just one person, that puts it at a little bit of jeopardy if something, goes sideways, so to speak. And so I think we will always need charismatic leaders or spokespersons to give out that information, to get to draw in those that are right on the edge or just a little beyond that. But then it's going to take individual organizations and individual practitioners and ministers who may not be on the so-called forefront to be ready, willing, and able to take these people as they come through the door, if you will, and make them feel welcome, teach them, be understanding with them, work with them, create this environment that works for everyone, in that it allows everybody to be right where they are. There's no pressure. There's no guilt. There's none of that. Wherever you are, that's where we're going to start. And if you keep going, you may see somebody you admire, like one of the charismatic leaders. You too can get there if you just take the steps and follow the path. Your volume. Mike, your mic is out.
Oh, thank you, bro. Dishing out the wisdoms today. And we can look at this. The picture on your screen is a group of those very charismatic leaders, folks. Some of these people you may know, some of them you may not. That's all right. This is the Association for Global New Thought, also known as AGNT. And they do great work in the world. There's more videos down here. And what AGNT has always been about really has been the opportunity to bring together the leaders of various New Thought organizations. So AGNT isn't so much the charismatic leaders, although it was started by a group of them: Michael Bernard Beckwith, Roger Teal, Howard Caesar, Temple Hayes, others, Barbara Fields, who we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's been brought together as an opportunity for a group of those charismatic leaders to come together, and then over time it's become who's ever in that seat. So whoever happens to be the spiritual leader of Centers for Spiritual Living is also with AGNT. Whoever happens to be in certain positions around the movement is immediately brought into AGNT. To me, this feels like a very different way of doing a collaborative organization. And I'd love to hear a little bit more of your thoughts and feelings around it, Z.
Well, you know, the great thing I like about this collaborative organizations like AG&T that brings leaders and individuals from the various organizations together to create this coalition. It allows us, those of us who are on the same wavelength or frequency, if you will, to have, although the message may be delivered differently, there is a consistency within it about what we're teaching, what we're about, what we're trying to bring about. And it gives everybody, you know, a chance to get the flavor that they like. You know, everybody don't like strawberry soda. Some people like grape. Some people like orange. Some people like, you know, lemonade. And so when we're able to give this information in different flavors so that it's palatable for the different individuals and taste and experience of the many people coming to the door, now we got something to work with.
Right. Exactly. Yes. And I love what you're moving towards, because for me, AGNT represents that opportunity for all the various denominations, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've said before, it's the apparent false appearance of denominationals, that the AGNT gets to represent and make sure that all those various voices get heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so the programs and the initiatives that they bring forward have all the various perspectives and voices and viewpoints, if you will, of New Thought brought together and put out on the table. So you know that the unity voice and philosophy is represented. You know the divine science voice and philosophy is represented, and the emerging versions of New Thought as well. Those pictures don't just represent the leaders of a few organizations. That picture represents leaders of a number of what are determined to be emerging organizations in the New Thought movement.
And the good thing about that as well is that we know that different individuals, whether that individual is a physical person or is a individual entity, right? Right. Everybody comes with a certain set of skills and talents and gifts. And so one organization may be very good at community outreach that another one may not be, but then one that has a blueprint or a framework from which you can operate from if you want to initiate that in your community or in your organization, and how to get it started and so forth and so on. And that could be used across all. And that's just one example of the benefit of the cross-pollination, if you will. You know,
right.
It's like, I'm from Florida, as you know, and they started out with cross-pollinating oranges and tangerines, and they have all kind of satsumas and tangelos and all these different variety of citrus fruit that was a result of the cross-pollination of oranges and tangerines. All of them are very good, slightly different, but they still got the citrus flavored, citrus benefits of vitamin C and all that. But depending on your taste or depending on where you want to go, you can pick one that works for you.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Hey, folks, we're going to run out of time here, and we do have a couple organizations we want to highlight and still present you to and make sure that you're aware of. However, before we leave the AGNT train, I do want to say that I have the distinct pleasure to appear on their programming tomorrow at 12 Mountain Time. Or is that what I just looked at it, and now I'm going to click away from it. 12 Central Time. Tomorrow on their Facebook page. Just do a search for Association for Global New Thought or AGNT on Facebook, and I'll be appearing on their program AGNT Speaks with Reverend Aaron McCabe from the Unity Chapel at Unity Village in Missouri. So join us for that. All right, before we head on, a couple more quick organizations we want to share with you. This is one of my personal new favorites. So I'll be straight up and honest. Being brought up in CSL, I had a bit of an arrogance about Centers for Spiritual Living and didn't put much effort into learning about some of the other organizations out there. And ANTN, or the Affiliated New Thought Network, is an organization that I've had the recent pleasure to get acquainted with and come to know. The board and the people. Was at their recent conference, and ANTN is just amazing. It's the Affiliated New Thought Network, a little bit different than all the others. And Z, what I love here is all of these organizations, in one way or another, have a educational arm.
Yes.
Unity has Unity Worldwide Ministries that takes care of all their education. Centers for Spiritual Living has the Emerson Institute, takes care of all the education pieces. All of the Agape has their own onboard in-house education. Interfaith has their own education. Interlight has their own education. There's nothing wrong with any of that. There's all these various things. ANTN, to me, is a little different in that they don't have their own education program, but they align with a different education program, which is the Emerson Institute. And they align themselves with that. And therefore, ANTN does not rely on their own education to prove membership or to prove you're valid, to prove your papers or what they say they are. They allow New Thought education from all of the New Thought traditions to come in and be welcomed, and it's pretty important. They like to say yes is the one I heard from them a lot. All right, before we get out of here, folks, there is one other organization we want to make sure that you're aware of. Also, new friends of mine, International New Thought Alliance, and this is we saved these folks for the end here because they are the oldest New Thought and the longest New Thought organization at just 108 years, I think it is now. They were the very first alliance to come together and say, hey, a whole bunch of us think differently than some of the rest of the world. We think this and we like this New Thought philosophy. How about if we all start hanging out together and having a good time and getting to know each other? And they do all kinds of wonderful things. You'll see here on their website. There's more and more information. So check them out as well. It's a wide world of New Thought out there, Z.
Yes, it is. And that's good because, if it's like going to university and going to College of Arts and Science, right? They have various degrees or majors, but they all roll up to arts and science, and they may seem varied and everything, but in reality, each one of them supports the whole thing from a different perspective. So, so under the arts and sciences, of course, you will find engineering and science and math in some cases, but you also find art and architecture and acting. So all those work together because they give you a full operation or full set of tools to present information, ideas, and have people embody them, which is what we're really about, is learning principles and practices that we can embody to make this a world that works for everyone.
Amen. All right, dear ones. I think we have pretty much effectively used most of our time here today. We do want to say thank you for being with us, and we want to say thank you to the people that make this possible. So if you've got one more minute, please hang out and help us say thank you to our financial supporters.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Heckerland Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Odgen, thank you for your very generous donation. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.
For all of your support to make New Thought Media Network possible. All right, Z, before we run out of time completely here, final thoughts.
Well, if you are interested in understanding or learning or becoming a part of this world that works for everyone, find an organization, find a center, find a person of the New Thought teachings and engage them. Go join a group, go visit a service, ask them about their education institution, because now more than ever, we need a world that works for everyone.
Amen. And if you'd like to do that online, check out New Thought Media Network. All right, folks, we're out of here. I love you. We'll be back. We don't know if we're going to be here next week or not. We might be here pre-recorded. We might show, but we're definitely not going to be here live because of time frames and time zones. So, but do look for our programming all next week from the CSL convention. Both Reverend Z and I will be there doing all kinds of pop-up interviews and all kinds of other fun stuff. So until then, peace.
Peace.